Ryan Johnston. I've been a fly fishing guide for 22 years. I'm the founder and executive director of Cast Hope, and this is the Tom Rowland podcast.
Ryan, what's up, man?
Good to see you, man. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
I know it was a very quick turnaround from initial contact to doing it. And then this is going to be one of the fastest turnarounds we've ever had. This is going to be on tomorrow.
Wow.
So Jake's going to be busy editing this one tonight, but we had a hole in the schedule and it worked out perfect. And so, you know, we've never met but we have a lot in common. You're a fishing guide. You're in Montana.
Yes, sir. Been here for about 3 years. Lived in Northern California, guided there for 2 decades. Did 5 summers guiding in Idaho when I was in my late 20s before we had kids. And so I've been, bouncing around 3 different states of guiding, and now I find myself in Montana for the last 3 years.
Okay. What part of Montana?
Yeah, we're located up in the northwest corner. The big town is Kalispell. We're about 2 hours north of Missoula for people who get a little geography lesson here.
Right on. Yeah. My son worked up there around Glacier. Both my boys went to Montana State. And so they have a lot of Montana in their blood. But my oldest son, he worked up there around Glacier at a ranch, a really cool ranch up there. Anyway, but beautiful up there. So nice. What part of Idaho did you guide in?
So I guided on the South Fork of the Snake, and I know you have some Jackson Hole routes. So
that's where I guided too. Guess what my boat number was?
Oof.
It might even be here.
Sub 1,000.
6.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
my boat number
impressive.
Was 6, and I have it around here somewhere. I should have it somewhere I could see it. Jake, do you see a tag over there? It's brown. It has a 6 on it anywhere. Anyway, it doesn't matter. My number was 6. My boss's number was 1. He got number 1. So we were, so I worked for Bressler Outfitters. We were the only Wyoming guide Wyoming outfitter that had a license on the South Fork of the Snake River. And for whatever reason, when they decided, I think it might have been kind of because the Idaho people didn't like us coming over there. And so they instituted that boat number, kind of program. And for whatever reason, they gave us the first ones. So Joe Bressler had number 1, and we were a very small outfit at that time. I was the lowest on the totem pole, and that was number 6. But still, that's a little bit of history there that I should have that thing framed, because now I don't know what the numbers are now. What is a number on the South Fork? 10,
well, there's only 6 permits to guide the South Fork, so it doesn't matter whether you're in Wyoming or in Idaho. You have to own one of those 6. Yeah, my family owns a property in Star Valley, so just down the hill from Jackson Hole.
Nice.
So
the home of the Square Scoop.
What's that?
The home of the Square Scoop, Star Valley, or that's Swan Valley. Swan Valley is the home of the Square Scoop. You ever go get a square ice cream cone?
100%. It's got to be Huckleberry.
Deal,
man. Get a Square Scoop.
That's right. That's right. But Star Valley, that's where your family has property?
Yes, sir. Yeah. We had property there since the early 90s. So Star Valley is the next valley south of Swan. And spent 5 summers guiding on the South Fork. Worked for an Orvis Lodge from 27 to my early 30s, and had a blast, guiding out there. I mean, it's one of the best dry fly fisheries of the West. And
isn't it? That place is amazing. It's so great. My boys, like I said, they were at Montana State, but they rarely got down that far. And so when my son was getting married, we did his bachelor party. He was nice enough to invite me to his bachelor party. It wasn't the same bachelor party that most people have. We went fishing, and we did a canyon shot on the South Fork. And I was so excited to show them that river because they just had not seen it. I don't know. I mean, Montana's awesome, but that river is amazing. I mean, it really is an amazing river.
I mean, it's got to be top 10 fisheries of the West. Something about throwing big dry flies and, having fish that are averaging 16 to 18 inches and, cutthroats, browns, rainbows, the whole mix. And then having, over 50 fishable miles and, not getting stuck to one drift below, some certain dam and a tailwater. Like it's truly a special spot. And, way better than most Montana rivers, to be honest.
Yeah. My first guided trip ever was on the Salt River right there next to your house, probably. And the takeout, I remember Joe Bressler saying, okay, you're going to go down to the Salt and, the takeout, you can't miss the takeout. If you miss the takeout, you're going to end up in Palisades Reservoir. And I was terrified. I was so terrified. Every little side channel that I saw, I was like getting out of the boat and like wading the boat over there and like trying to see if that was the ramp or a side channel, or I was so terrified. That was, wow, good times. Do you remember your first guided trip?
I do. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of commonality here, Tom. My first guided trip was actually on the South Fork of the Snake. I had never touched a fly rod before. And something about watching cutthroat rise to a dry fly. The next day we were in a local mom and pop fly shop and bought a Finwick rod. And I actually learned how to fish on the Salt. That's really where I taught myself. And that's where my passion of fly fishing began. I still fish it when I go back. It's not nearly the fishery it was 30 years ago, but kind of a side note, but I have told all my family that whenever my time here on Earth ends, I'll be cremated and my ashes are going to be dumped into the Salt River. So that's my wishes.
Salt. All right, on.
Salt. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, it's got to end where it started, right? It start where the passion was found. Yeah.
I love it. But tell me about your first guided trip.
Yeah, we fished one of the upper. Where I was guiding, or me being guided?
Yeah. No, where you were guiding.
Yeah, so I was 12 years old. It was my birthday, and I'm pretty sure my father used it as an excuse to go on a guided fishing trip. Him or me had never fly fished before, and we saw the famous Brad Pitt scene and made us want to be curious about it. And so, upper drifts of the, South Fork, we're cracking off flies because we're casting too fast and the guide's frustrated, but, caught a handful of fish on dry flies and just saw those fish rising off the bank. And I was raised conventional fishing, raised in San Diego, fishing offshore. And something about that visual aspect of watching the cutthroat rise, it really just caught my soul, and it just started this long journey. It was just kind of a summer thing for me for a long time, going out to my family's property in Star Valley. And then once I graduated high school, I left San Diego, moved to Northern California, and then found myself in kind of a fly fishing playland with, steelhead and stripers and bass and trout and all the different things that Northern California provides. So what's really cool in a full circle story is I started my first guide trip ever, first day fly fishing ever, 12 years old on the South Fork of the Snake. I would end up guiding the South Fork of the Snake 15 years later. So the first place I casted a fly, I would end up guiding, my late 20s. So to take it another step, I have a kid I've mentored through our organization, Cast Hope, who would become a guide there 10 years after I left. So that whole area of Jackson Hole, Star Valley, Swan Valley, that holds a huge part of my heart. It's where my passion was found for the sport. And I still go back there for a month every summer. The whole month of August, I'm hanging out in that nice. Zone. So
that's awesome. And so how did you become a guide?
Yeah, I went to UC Davis for college. So this is 2001. My freshman year of college, I think I fished 90 days on the water. I, barely passed my classes, but, I just, in San Diego, there wasn't a lot of freshwater options. It was mostly offshore saltwater stuff. So unless you owned a boat, that was not easily accessible. So up there, all of a sudden, it wasn't just a summer thing. Okay, well, I'm surrounded by water that I can walk and wade and do a bunch of stuff. So Just became familiar my freshman year, and then I started working in a local fly shop. This is my sophomore year of college, a year later, and did that for about a year. And then the fly shop owner's like, "Hey, have you ever thought about guiding?" And I hadn't, I didn't think I had enough skill. But my parents, as I was raised as a kid, they loved road tripping. And so every summer we took trips across the Rockies. And as a youth and teenager, I got to experience some of the top fisheries across the West. And I was hand taught by guides over like a 5 or 6 year period. And so on a whim, the owner of the fly shop convinced me I should check it out. And I needed about $5,000 to go buy a drift boat, to kind of get in the game. So over Christmas break, I went and talked to my grandfather. I walked into his office of his company, sat down in front of him and said, "Grandpa, can you give me a $5,000 loan? I really want to buy a drift boat. I want to become a guide. I want this to become kind of a source of income for me." And so he's like peering over these glasses, looking at me. And he's like, "You know what, grandson?" He goes, "He doesn't need to be a loan. I'm just going to write you a $5,000 check and we'll call it a Christmas gift. And you go show those boys, how to work hard." And that was the start. And 2 months later, I had my first guide trip and had no freaking clue what I was doing. But you just piece it together, right? And that's turned into 22 years.
Tell me what that first boat. Tell me what that first boat was.
So I bought a high side hide that I had. I think I rode it for 7 years before I, traded in for a new one.
What color was it?
It was blue and white with a yellow streak through the middle. I've always had a blue drift boat for 22 years.
That's the color of my first drift boat. I got a Clackacraft first. My first boat was a Clackacraft. And that was, we used to guide the Snake in a 18-foot John boat. And I rode that river lots of times in an 18-foot John boat with customers. But back then, it wasn't that common to see drift boats. You would see, there was like a Yellowstone drifter. There were a couple of Clackacrafts around, some aluminum cofflers, but it was not a common thing, and certainly very, very uncommon for a private individual to have a drift boat back then, unless they were like a carpenter and they built one. You would see these beautiful, unbelievably handcrafted, drift boats that somebody had made in their garage over the winter. But other than that, you would see a lot of rafts or John boats. And then, it was a funny time back then. I've talked about this a number of times, but that period, with the movie A River Runs Through It, when that came out, it really spurred on so many things. It wasn't just the movie, but it was like a perfect storm of so many different things that were happening at the same time. So that movie brought tons of people just out to the West, right? They thought, oh, well, that looks like Jackson. So we got a lot of those people that saw the movie. But it wasn't filmed there like it was filmed further north. And, but anyway, they came, and then the rods got better. Then we had the Gore-Tex wader, fly lines got better, like everything got better, more comfortable. And then there was this resurgence of like drift boat manufacturers. And so now the boats are better. You're in Gore-Tex waders and not these giant duck hunting waders. Like everything just got better, and it made it much more, it brought down the intimidation factor of fly fishing, I think, at that time. But so many things got better all at once. And then, there were more shops, there were more flies. It was just easier for everybody, because the difference between, like I told you, I was number 6 on the river there, and I was the 6th guide in our outfit. But the following year was when the movie came out, and then we had 26 guides. Like it grew that fast, that quickly, like so many people there. And then just like the guy that was asking you to be a guide, my boss was just like, can you row a boat? Like he's just throwing people in there. But that was an incredible explosion that I don't think that we'll ever have again, because it wasn't just the movie. It was all of these other innovations too that happened kind of all at a really wild time for that. And we got so many people and women in the sport too. Like that, it wasn't really being pushed towards women at all, and then it made it. I mean, we had in our outfit, we had the first 3 female guides in Jackson were all employed from Wrestler Outfitters. Lorianne Murphy, Kim Keeley, and Christy Ball. They were all there all at once. So I don't know. That was a really strange explosion in fishing.
Sounds like I started at a perfect time. Everything was easier.
You did. That's right. You did. You did. I like your videos. Like when I was doing some research on you right away, you got these videos on your Instagram account, which is RJ's Fly Trips on Instagram, right? RJS
Yep.
Fly Trips.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so RJ's Fly Trips on Instagram, that's your account. You got some really great videos there. You have a little series. What I could tell is I think there are like 9 videos so far. And you said that you were going to plan on doing this for a year. And it's kind of like, so you want to be a fishing guide. And you go over these different subjects. I wrote a few of them down. I mean, it starts out like the last. I watched them in reverse actually. So I watched the latest one first, and then I was interested in that, and so I went back and it's really pretty interesting. Have you had good feedback on those?
I have, yeah. I've committed to doing 100 of them, which I know is a pretty big commitment, and I'm figuring 2 a week for a year. After 22 years of doing this and guiding in 3 different states, and also running a nonprofit where I'm hiring guides, I think I have a pretty unique perspective of what guiding truly is, and I just have a big heart for people who are thinking about becoming guides, younger guides. I think a lot of people get into guiding because they think it's some sexy career. And it totally can be, but then over time it just morphs, and it's a great career if you're single. Like if you're a single man or a single woman, like absolutely go for it, put your whole heart into it. But then when you get married, it changes. And when you have kids, it changes. The dynamics of, my family's now more important than me being on the water first and being off the water last. And, I think you get to this point, we talked about before the show where there's some mastery that happens. You start understanding where the fish are going to show up, that, I don't need to be there until the tide switches, or I don't need to be there till 10 o'clock when the flies come off or the hatch comes off. So I don't know. I feel like I have a pretty unique perspective that's very honest. And I just want to share that with people, and I just want to have a conversation. And some of the videos are me ranting because there's some really wrong views of what guiding is, and I'm trying to correct those into what my opinion of guiding. And I'm not trying to say that I know all and I've experienced all. My hands.
No, it's your opinion, right?
Yes,
it's your opinion, and it's your experience that's showing that. So let's talk about like one of the things that you think is kind of a wrong idea about guiding.
Well, I mean, one of it is that you can make a bunch of money as a guide, and that one's tricky, right? Because financially, everyone has a different perspective in the world, right? I mean, if you make $100,000, the guy who makes 200 is the wealthy guy, right? And so you have to kind of check yourself at the door of like, what is your true perspective, in my opinion. And can you make a good living? 100%. I mean, I've done it for over 2 decades. Like I literally, fly fishing has been my living. Now it's like it's morphed into other things. It's beyond just guiding now. And so, yes, I have provided for myself and my family. My wife doesn't work. She stays home and she homeschools our kids. So like, yes, there is a decent chunk of money, but are you become a millionaire? Probably not. I mean, there are a few guys who do it, but, in my opinion, those guys who do become millionaires as fishing guides, I mean, it's like the same odds of you making the NFL or the NBA. Like it's a sub, half.
Well, maybe they made a small fortune. Like there are people that make a small fortune guiding, and you know how you do that most effectively? You start with a large fortune.
What's that?
You start with a large fortune, and then you end up with a small fortune.
or you
marrying,
have a sugar mama or daddy, sugar mama and daddies. I have lots
certainly
of good
can
buddies.
happen. That certainly can happen, but there is a draw for like guiding. So there are guides that are charging over $1,000 a day. So somebody does the math and they're like, "Whoa, $1,000 a day." Let's just use that for. I mean, there's guys that charge way more than that. But let's just say $1,000 a day. You do $1,000 a day, and you work 300 days a year. Okay, if you're going to be in a place where you're working 300 days a year, that is going to be a high tourism area. Jackson won't even count because it's winter there sometimes, and the water is frozen. So let's just say Key West. You're going to Key West, where this is what I did. I went to Key West. I did work 300 days a year for more than 10 years, and in order to the reason I had to do that is because Key West is a tourist place where the real estate and the houses and everything there is extremely expensive. And so in order to provide for your family, that's about how much time you have to put on the water. So you're making, and we didn't charge $1,000 a day. It was way less than that when I started. But let's just say you have $1,000. You work 300 days a year. That's $300,000. In order to support that, you probably have to have all the right equipment, which might be a $150,000 boat. And you need to pull that boat with a $100,000 truck. And you have a payment on that. And then you want to provide for your family, so you live in a nicer neighborhood. And all of a sudden, that $300,000, believe it or not, you're barely making a profit. Barely. You are providing a nice lifestyle, but you're not putting any money away. And it happens very, very, very often. And so, and then every year you're getting a new boat. Okay. Sometimes you can get into a situation to where that makes financial sense, but oftentimes it doesn't. And you just have a nice boat. It's your office. Like, I used to think of it that way. Like, I spend almost all my time in this boat. I want a nice boat. I want a good one, right? And also, this is what people are paying for. So I want a perfectly nice boat. I want to keep it super clean, and I want it really, really nice. But that comes at a cost, right? There's a payment on that every month. And on a blue sky month, you book 30 days, you fish 30 days. But most months, you got 3 or 4 or 5 weather days. Maybe somebody doesn't even show up. Right? I don't know. That's kind of the more accurate scenario that I don't think that people necessarily see, is that the expenses are so high. And then you got fuel, right? And breakdowns and maintenance and all that kind of stuff.
And I think
go ahead.
There's another aspect to that too. The cost is extremely high. You talk about cost of living, but let's be honest, if you're pulling a boat for 300 days in a season, what's the effects on your body? I mean, you could do it for 2 or 3 years, but you did it for 10. Your body is going to break down because your body's not going to get enough rest. The other part of that is that when you have a family, if you're guiding 300 days a year, you're the vacant dad. You're the guy who's not around ever. And I'll be honest here, there's a reason why most guides have second, third relationships, wives, lots of divorce rates. It's because we were required to be on the water so much and away from home for so long. I never did 300 days like you. I was doing low 200s, and even at that, you're pulling a boat, I'm rowing a boat, your body starts breaking down over time. And, this idea of having longevity, of trying to maximize your season, okay, there's 30 fishable days. I have to hit all 30 because I got to make X amount of dollars. Yeah, you have to do it when you're young because you're trying to provide for people. But the reality is what does that look like in 10 years? When you look at drift boat guides who are in their 50s, those dudes could barely walk. So you either have to be really financially smart and put money away. You got to marry someone who's in money or already have money. Because like you said, it's really hard to take that and stow that money into savings, retirement accounts. And then, by the time you're a drift boat guide, 55, you better have a different plan.
Yeah, but it can be done. It can be done. And some people have done a very good job of it. And some people are very disciplined with their money. Usually those people that are very disciplined with their money and have done a very good job with it have been fishing out of the same boat for the last 20 years, right? Like, then they've got an old truck and they know how to, they're watching their expenses very, very carefully. But, so that's one. What, I like your idea on tipping. Let's talk about tipping. What's your feeling on tipping a fishing guide?
Yeah, I mean, it's standard to our industry, so I think, it's required. I think sometimes you get situations where you do have people that show up that don't know that's the industry standard. In general, I believe baseline should be $100 tip per person. I know for you guys in the saltwater, it's, you're charging more, so your tips are going to be larger, in general, but, maybe. I tell people usually in the boat, $100 a person is a great tip. So if you're in a drift boat, you're getting handed $200 in cash in a day. Every guide's stoked. I think 100 is the minimum. $50 a person, is kind of the minimum, to keep your guide happy. I've been blanked one time in 22 years. There have been some situations where people didn't tip me and I just reached out and said, hey, I just want to make sure that you had a good experience. Is there something I can do better in the future? So that way I can learn, like, because you didn't tip. And they're like, oh, wow, wait, I was supposed to do that. So I think that sometimes you get those situations. I think it's appropriate to have a follow-up phone call or a text message, email, whatever, way you want to connect with them. I think it's totally appropriate. And most every situation, the person has, sent me a tip, post trip. Only one time to the guy, I was like, yeah, man, sorry, I don't want to pay anymore. I already paid you $650 for the day. And that feels like a good wage for me, so it was one guy's opinion. But yeah, I mean, it's customary to our industry, just like tipping a waiter or waitress. So I think everyone should do it.
Yeah, I hear you. And believe me, I lived on tips. I'm very grateful and thankful for the tips, but I never wanted to count on it. I felt like if like, let's just say back when I was fishing all the time, it was like $500 a day. Or so if you're charging $500 a day, but you're doing all your books and your budgeting for $700 a day because you're just assuming that you're going to get this $200 tip, that's a recipe for trouble because a lot of times you're not going to get it. And you said something interesting that I wanted to talk to you about. You said in the saltwater, you guys charge more, so your tips are bigger. But I don't think that's necessarily true. And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you because yes, on occasion, or if it goes by percentage, like if you're going to go to a more expensive restaurant and you're going to tip 20%, which is customary, it's going to be more expensive than if you go to a less expensive restaurant, right? But I think that so many saltwater guides are owner operators, right? So they're not splitting what you're paying them with anyone else. There's not an outfitter involved, right? But if you go out west and you're going to fish on the South Fork of the Snake River, none of those guys are owner operators. They are working for a day wage. So personally, I would be more likely to give a kid that takes me out fishing on the South Fork and works his ass off, because I've been there. First of all, I've already done that and I know what that's like. He is not in charge of how much the trip costs. He's just there to show up and show you a good time, and he's going to get paid the same regardless. So I would actually be more likely, and it makes more sense to me, to give that person a bigger tip because you're trying to help him out a little bit. The guy in saltwater that owns his own boat, I mean, like you're going to give him $1,000 and he's keeping all $1,000. Yeah. So, but I don't know that people even think about that. But it makes more sense to me that the kid that's paying, or the person who is working for an outfitter, needs the money more than someone else. And if he's charging $1,000 and that's not enough, then he needs to raise his rates to $1,200 and not assume that you're going to get the $200 tip. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, logically, I totally understand it. I totally get it. I've been in both situations. So 16 years in California, I was an independent guide. I ran my own program. I didn't work for an outfitter. On the South Fork for 5 summers, I did work for an outfitter. So I was making half of the money, so California money was way better. But California in the summertime, there wasn't a lot to do when I first started guiding. So you had to kind of find a summer plan. The tips didn't change, whether I was running my own trip or whether I was working for an outfitter and making less money per day. I really believe tips are predetermined for the most part before your client steps on the boat. Now, if you do a bad job and you're chewing the guy out because he can't make the cast or he's getting in a bunch of tangles, then I think that tip can be reduced. I think rarely is that tip increased. Unless they have some magical experience, they catch a fish of a lifetime. And I don't really believe that even affects the tip. I think there's more ability to reduce the tip than there is to increase it. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, Tom. And I have had that thought many times. At the same time, I believe you do have to keep your pricing competitive, unless you have a massive book. If you have a huge book of clients, then keep creeping that price up. And if they keep staying with you, then good for you, But for the average guide who's trying to make, a book of clients and stay relative, I think you do have to keep your pricing competitive versus the other captains. And only through lots of clients can you start, pushing that number up, in my opinion. When I left California, I was doing about 190 days a year, and 5 of those clients were doing 125 days. So I think we probably have a little bit of commonality in this too. I'm sure with your background, you had some massive clients. So my top client when I left California was doing 40 trips a year with me, and I was doing that for a decade with this guy. So we became dear friends. He's still one of my dear friends. When I do any hosted trips, these are the kind of guys that get invited. And then, so if 125 of those days were taken, the rest of the days, let's call them 70 days, were through another 10 clients. I was only guiding 15 guys. And I always had my prices marked higher than everyone else because they weren't going to go anywhere else. It wasn't like I was price gouging them, but they knew they were paying to fish with someone who was really good. And that was coming at a premium.
Yeah, they're happy to do it. And that's exactly what happens to almost every fishing guide is the longer you do it, the more days you do it, the fewer clients that you actually have. And it was exactly the same with me with just a handful of 3 or 4 people, literally fishing 100 days a piece. And that's awesome. I hope I can get there one day. It would be so awesome to fish 100 days a year with your favorite guide. But that's I don't know. It's great to have those customers. And then when you do have those customers, man, you got to take care of them. That is something. So you mentioned the hosted trips. What kind of hosted trips do you like to do? What are your favorite destinations?
Yeah, I'm a saltwater junkie. I love saltwater fishing. I did a trip 2 years ago for my 40th birthday. We went down to Mag Bay and we fished with the Los Locos boys. I know they're big hot on the map now. We fished with them on their second season, so it was a lot cheaper when I went. So I took 7 guys down there and we went and targeted striped marlin on the fly. And growing up in San Diego, I've chased lots of tuna and dorado and yellowtail, and I've done a lot of offshore fishing, hundreds of days of offshore fishing. But pulling up on a bait ball and watching free swimming striped marlin feed, that was National Geographic stuff. My brain was blown. And it's probably the coolest saltwater thing I've ever experienced. We were there just for 5 nights and 4 days. Unfortunately, 2 of the days we got blown off. We couldn't go offshore, which was what's great. Mag Bay has a huge inshore fishery, so we stayed inside. But the first day in Mag Bay, I actually was fishing with my dad, and we hooked 8 striped marlin on day 1, sight fishing them, having them eat 30 feet off the boat. And the coolest thing, which I was just blown away by, was when you get into a boiling tuna or foamers, like there's just chaos. But the striped marlin wasn't chaos. There was like the first bait ball we pulled up on, there was maybe 20 marlin, working this bait ball, but there was only like 5 of them that were actively feeding. They were all lit up, glowing. And then they had like 10 of them were underneath the bait ball, just pushing the bait up. And then there was like 5 on the edges patrolling. And then one would feed for a couple minutes and then it would slide off and one would move in. And like, it was just like a pack of wolves just devouring this, 10-foot wide bait ball. And I don't know, man, that was incredible. I'm actually going to No Name Lodge at the end of this month to go fish for those.
I've heard really good things about that. Yeah, I've heard really good things about that. My friends in Key West have been going there. Nickel Beatty's been going there a bunch. I've seen pictures. It looks really good.
Yeah, I got connected with them through the Los Locos guys. And they said, hey, if you think this is cool, this is equivalent on the East Coast. They're kind of just getting started. I know they're 3 or 4 seasons in now. So I'm taking a group of, 5 of us, 6 of us, I should say. And so, yeah, May 31st, we're hopping on a plane and flying to Puerto Rico.
All right. I think that'll be a really good trip. First of all, I think Puerto Rico is really interesting because, for one thing, it's a United States territory, which makes it easy to travel there. I think there's plenty of, hospitals and other things in case something bad happens, which is not the case on the trip I just got back from. I just went to the Seychelles, and it was kind of it was pretty much the big one, I think, for me. That's a very expensive trip, and it's a very, very, very long trip. But I went with actually some more Jackson Hole, commonality here. It was a WorldCast trip that I tagged on to. So a couple of my friends, they go on a lot of the WorldCast trips, and then WorldCast booked this trip through Fly Castaway, and we end up in Providence Atoll. And this was planned 3 or 4 years ago. My buddy said, I'm thinking about doing something really big for my 50th birthday. And I was like, well, what? And he said, Seychelles. And I said, okay, if you do the Seychelles, I'm in. And so I committed to it 3 years ago. Whenever you commit to something 3 years ago, it will never fall at a convenient time. It will. I mean, all of a sudden, this was like this came at not a time that I would have planned any sort of trip. My son just had a baby, so we had our first grandchild. My daughter's about to graduate and get married, and like there's a lot going on. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh man, I've got to go literally onto the other side of the world, which I'm glad I did. And it was a great trip, but man, what a trip to get there. The furthest fishing trip I've taken other than that, I went to Australia one time. That was pretty far away. That was an amazing trip. That was a hosted trip and fun. Christmas Island a couple of times, but that's a long way. But this one is further than either of those. And, man, I mean, we started out with a 2 hour van ride to a 13 and a half hour flight, a 12-hour layover, then an 8.5 hour flight, a day and a half pretty much sitting at this hotel, which was a nice hotel in Mahe, Seychelles. But you just can't miss this boat, right? Like your trip starts on this day. So if you miss a flight and then that's a 24-hour there's only so many flights, so you don't want to miss. So we got there early. We made sure that we were going to get there, get acclimated. It turns out it's like a day and a half. And so just to get there is like, what? Like that's a day and a half and then another day and a half. This is like 3-4 days of travel to get there. And then there's a 3-hour flight. We flew to Farquhar, then we fly to Providence, and then we get on the boat. And then that whole day, you're not even fishing. And then the fishing trip starts the next day. But excellent guides. All these guides were South African. Really, really good. I mean, it was one of those trips where you like these other guys, they haven't fished quite as much as I have. And they were asking like, what do you think about the guides? And I was like, these guides are truly world class. They are as good as you're going to find anywhere. Florida, Montana, California, anywhere. These guys are top notch. And they really were. They really, really were. But the South Africans have a great work ethic. They are extremely polite and very knowledgeable. And what more? I mean, and they catch fish. And they want to catch fish so bad. I mean, we were there, we were like with Tim Babbage. He's like the legendary guide there. I'm fishing with him. And it's like, Tim, is it time for lunch yet? And he's like, nope, we're not going to eat lunch we got to stop over here. Then we got to go over there. Then we got to go over there. And then maybe we'll eat lunch after that. And, you know, it's like, he wants to catch fish. He wants to catch fish. He wants you to catch fish. But what an incredible experience. You know, we're on a mothership. And that was cool. The Seychelles it was a good trip. It was a really good trip. But even, I don't know, I would say that there are other places where you catch more fish, but that's not, I mean, you kind of go, it's kind of like going permit fishing or tarpon fishing or something. You know, you're not going to catch that. Even if everything goes perfectly, you're not going to catch 100 fish. It's just not set up for that. But the GT fishing, the trigger fish, we caught bonefish. But then one of my favorite things was like just all these different wild species. They would do this thing called bommy bashing, where you just put these big flies on and you throw at these coral heads.
Nice.
And I guess this is what the Keys were like, 150 years ago, where you could just roll up to a coral head and throw a fly in there, and no chum, nothing, and all of a sudden, a 25-pound grouper comes off the bottom and smashes that thing on the surface. Like, seriously, that was what was happening. It was bizarre. They had these incredible snappers that were. They just would, if we had that in the Keys, people wouldn't even fish for bonefish. They would just be doing that all the time. It was incredible. But I love that. When you go to one of those, those destinations like that, where you have a really good time and you see some stuff that you haven't seen before, it can change everything about your fishing career. Like, have you ever taken a trip where it just like reset your whole brain on what's possible and what you want to do with the rest of your life? Like, I've got to come back here. Or I've got to host more trips, or I want to see so many more things.
I think anytime we get out of our normal world, right, we get our eyes open to new ways to do things, or, South African guides, right? And Mag Bay was greatly eye-opening to me. I actually had one of the days we fished inside. They had their full ponga boats trying to fish inside the bay, and they were fishing an outgoing tide. Well, being raised in San Diego, I was taught how to throw a shooting head when I was 14. And I was raised on fishing tidal water and knowing how to, mend your shooting head, which, allow it to sink further. And a lot of these guys, those local guys, were younger, and then they didn't have trolling motors on their boats, so they weren't really, set up appropriately. And so we get up to this first kind of tidal ledge they want to fish, and we're throwing 9 weights with 350 grain heads and, 2-aught Clousers. And it was really interesting watching how they were doing it. And in my mind, like, I already knew it wasn't working. Like, our flies weren't sinking far enough. And so they have a Mexican captain, and then you have one of the Los Locos guides with you. And I said, hey, man, we're not going to catch anything this way because you're in 20 feet of water according to your depth finder. And our flies are probably in 5 feet of water. And so I was like, tell the guy to put the boat into reverse, to actually go with the tide rather than motoring against it. And, then I'll tell you when to put the boat in neutral, and then we'll start stripping so our lines stay perpendicular. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, dude, I've guided for stripers in a river for a decade. Like, this is exactly like striper fishing. So we had done their system for like 15, 20 minutes, hadn't got a bump. And then, I'm fishing with one of my regular clients on a host trip. And so we cast and we mend and we let our line sink. The captain's listening to, boat control. And then I said, okay, put it in neutral. And then we strip twice and we both double up. And the Los Loca guys, he looks at me, he's like, what the hell, dude? I was like, well, you need a trolling motor to do this right. But so we kind of changed their methods. And then that evening, he talked to the guy who runs the whole program. And the guy the next morning after breakfast, he's like, Ryan, can we go for a walk down the beach? I'm like, yeah, sure, man. And so he goes, I heard that you guys had some really awesome experiences yesterday and that you were kind of coaching up our guide staff. I was like, well, yeah. And he goes, how about you come down for a month and you just fish inside the bay and you dial this in and you teach us? And I was like, 10 years ago, I would have said yes, but I have a young family. And it was this eye-opening moment for me because it was like, oh, okay, you've been guiding for 5 or 6 years. I'm doing it for a lot longer. And I mean, it'd be like you having a young tarpon guide take you fishing, right? Like you're going to see things, you're going to know things instinctually from all that you've learned on thousands of days on the water. And I haven't done as many days as you, but I've also, in that same area. And that was kind of eye-opening to me that like, oh, I can go to other places and I can talk to other guides and encourage them. And it's just still part of the video series that we mentioned of like, we both have things that people can learn from us. And I just want to share that, so that trip, not only the fishing was mind blowing, but this little interaction that naturally happened, it also kind of started changing my mindset of like, maybe I need to share this with people and not just keep all the secrets and all the knowledge inside me,
Yeah. So I also noticed that you wrote 3 books, or you're in the process of your 3rd, maybe. I don't know. You've written books. So is that part of this knowledge sharing too? Or is that like funny stories? I couldn't quite, I mean, like I just checked out on the surface, like all about you, but I was interested in your writing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. Actually, it started in Star Valley. I was hosting my first group of anglers to Star Valley when I was guiding there. So we had 8 of my clients sitting in our house. And after dinner one night, we're sipping on bourbon, drinking wine. And one of the clients said, hey, tell me your best guide story. And so I rattled off some funny story. And then that turned into a second one and a third one. And eventually we've been there for a few hours and, people are making comments, but it's me just, reliving, stupid shit that's happened in the boat, inspirational things that have happened in the boat. And went to bed not thinking anything of it. And my dad the next morning, we're sipping on coffee and goes, wow, last night was awesome. He goes, do you realize you had the whole room entertained for like 2.5 hours? And I was like, yeah, it was neat. And, he's like, I think there's something there. I think whether for yourself or our family, you should write some of those stories down because when you get to an older man like me, some of those specific moments are going to start getting blurry. And it kind of sat there in my mind for years. And when we had our first child, so my oldest is 14, Maggie, I was having a hard time working from home just because of all the crying and, diaper changes. And, when you're home, then you're accessible. So you have to help too. And so I was going and working at like a local Starbucks or a local coffee shop. And I'd finished all my laptop work and I had about 3 hours before I needed to be back to the house. And so I just opened up Word and just started typing. And, God's really given me this very... I know, I can relive things. I have this memory that's very, very vivid. When I dream at night, I dream really vivid. And so if something meaningful, I don't know why it has to be meaningful, but like the birth of Maggie, I can literally close my eyes. I can go back into that room. I can see it. I can hear it. I can feel it. And so the same thing happens to me when we're guiding. And again, it might just be a magical fish. It could be a really bad client. It could be a really inspirational moment that has nothing to do with fishing. So I just had a blast kind of reliving that and just also giving it a little my own flair of like what I thought was personally happening. And so I just started doing this like once a month. And over 2 years, I wrote out the first book. And then, we had our second child and then I didn't have any time, right? Like, who has time once you have 2 babies? And it sat there for years. And then when COVID hit, all my guide trips were canceled. I found myself at home for 2 months. So I took the whole month of April of 2020. I woke up before my family and I rewrote the whole thing. And I was timid, man, because when you write, like, you're putting yourself out there. Like, it's more than just talking, on a podcast. And hired an editor, and I kind of got his feedback, and he's like, dude, the stories are great. You need some help with your writing, and that's what you're hiring me for. And I published the first one. It's called A Real Job, kind of a play on words. And a lot of people liked it. And after a couple hundred private messages of people asking, are you going to write a second one? I was like, holy shit, like, there's something here, and it's not a bestseller. We're not selling, 10,000 copies. We're 5 years since I published the first book, and, I've sold maybe 2,500 copies. But yeah, there was enough people asking for more. And so I wrote book number 2, and book number 2 has just been as successful as the first one. And so I've just continued. Book 3 will be coming out next winter. It's currently being edited right now. And book number 3 is a little bit different because it's 100% migratory fish that either enter saltwater or live in saltwater full time. So that's kind of my true passion. The first 2 books have been more freshwater oriented, trout, steelhead, bass, that kind of stuff. But the third book is going to be 100% migratory fish. So yeah, I don't know. It's a part of me. I found it's this journey. I publish 4 or 5 articles for magazines each year. I'll have a thought come up and like, oh, that's kind of fun, and pitch the idea to some people. And it's not what I do with most of my time, but it's something I do on the side.
So the first book was stories, like real stories that like the funniest things you could remember, or the most interesting things or inspirational things. Did that carry through to the second one? Like, you had enough stories that it filled a second book?
Yeah, I probably have enough for 5 books, to be honest. And now
real stories.
Yep. Yeah.
Real stories that really happened. Okay.
Yep, it's 100% truth. And then you're getting kind of a guide's perspective from it. I think this is what people are really liking. It's not written from an angler's point of view. It's not like, oh, I made the beautiful cast to the sipping cutthroat with the snow-capped mountains behind you. It's none of that. It is honest. It's real. Like, this is what's happening. Here's a little bit of a guide's perspective of what, my take on the situation. And it's not all just dumb, silly stuff. I mean, yes, there is that mixed into there for laughs. But some of it, man, is like really powerful. Like the first book, the final chapter, it's a really emotional chapter. And a lot of people say it actually makes them cry. It's a story about a good friend of mine who was battling cancer. And I took him fishing on literally the day before he passed away. He would get off the boat. He was on full oxygen tanks. He caught his last fish somehow. He got like a suicide fish that pretty much hooked itself. His wife came to support him. His wife had never fly fished before. He fished for like an hour, caught this suicide fish. It would be the last fish he catches of his life. And then he asked me, will you teach my wife how to do it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so now I'm giving her lessons. She misses a few, hooks a few, loses them. And then literally in the last spot, his wife hooks and lands not even a big fish. It was like a 16-inch rainbow. But I mean, being so poetic that my good friend caught and landed his last fish of his life, and his wife of that time caught her first fish on a fly rod of her life. And we had another friend with us, and the two of them, as I was rowing off, they were just embracing and hugging and crying. And I mean, Tom, it was outside of seeing my kids born, probably the most powerful moment of my entire life. And I got to be a part of that just because I'm a fishing guide. And yes, I helped facilitate some of those, moments, but, I knew he was near the end of his life. I had no idea that we would row off, and he would pass away the next morning, literally less than 12 hours after he got off my boat, So that is the real thing that happened. Like, I literally said the same thing at this guy's funeral. And I don't know, it's because of this vivid memory I have. I can go back to that space. So a lot of my guide buddies have been guiding as long as me for 2 decades. And they're like, I don't understand how you have all these stories, but I think I just retain them more than the average guide does.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting here is that you just told this story that is so meaningful, and you're so grateful that you were such a part of this. And we started this conversation talking about how expensive guiding is, how difficult it is to make a living, how some people don't tip, how all of these different things that are challenging about guiding. But honestly, fish aside, I mean, it's awesome to catch a big fish or something like that. But to have an experience like that and to facilitate an experience like that, that's really what guiding's all about. And you know what? When you're talking about you have a theme in your videos of it takes about 5 years for you to really become a guide, right? You do it for about 5 years, and then then about year 5 or 6 or even 7, you're really hitting your stride, and you're starting to understand that it's about way more than catching fish. Or at least it is for people like yourself, people like me, I think, and a whole host of others that take guiding to an art form. And sometimes it is about getting somebody that is literally would never be able to catch this fish with anyone else. You just become you create this special bond where they trust you enough to do what you're saying, and you basically catch the fish for them with the boat, right? That happens all the time, and it's very, very rewarding when it can happen for a fishing guide. I mean, a guy on the oars can back up and set the hook, right? Like, and it would have never happened. But what's truly like why you end up doing it for a long time, I think, are stories like what you just told, or stories of a father and a son, having this super special moment. And you just know, you're just sitting over there making a sandwich, and you just know, like, this moment is going to stay with those guys. I'm just going to stay over here and keep my mouth shut and not say a word, because I'm not messing up this moment. Like, this is a truly special moment that those two people are going to remember for the rest of their life. And you're a part of it. Sometimes it's like a fly on the wall, and sometimes you're like really a part of it. But wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. And I'd like to read your books. Where do you get your books?
I will mail you 2 free copies.
Well, yeah, but that's great, and I appreciate that. But where does somebody else, like, we have a lot of people listening to this, where would they find your books?
Yeah, go on Amazon. They're both there. First one's called A Real Job, and second one's called Really, Reely, Unbelievable Fly Fishing Guide Stories.
Great.
Yeah, buy them on Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. And so the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and actually what we kind of originally got hooked up for, was Cast Hope. So tell me what that is.
So Cast Hope's a fly fishing nonprofit that I started in 2009. It's a really basic idea of using fly fishing as a vehicle to encourage underserved kids, kids who come from, trauma-based backgrounds, broken homes, addiction homes, and using fly fishing as a vehicle to get them into the outdoors and just create a positive space for them to not only connect with nature, but also to connect with healthy guides. And we have about 30 guides across our regions who support us in that. So we're hiring guides and using professionals who are doing this for a living to increase our retention. Our biggest thing that we believe is that fishing doesn't change a kid's life. We're just using the vehicle to create a mentorship space. And that if we can use guides to give the highest possible experience, right, rather than a volunteer who may or may not know how to fish, a volunteer who hasn't been on the flats or the river for months and isn't really keyed into what's happening, but if we're paying these guides to take these kids out, and the kid has the highest potential of having it, and it's a great, incredible experience. And then the kid wants to come back and continue to participate with Cast Hope over years at a time. So our hope is that a kid will come in at whatever age. We serve kids from 10 to 18. And say that kid comes at the age of 12. We hope that kid will maintain and stay in our program all the way until he graduates high school. Cast Hope started in Northern California. That's where I used to live. That's where we started it, and God's really blessed it. It now is in 5 regions. So we have a Northern California, Southern California, Reno, Nevada, Salmon, Idaho, and then we just launched Flathead Valley here in Montana this spring. So we're going to have 1,000 kids this year, Tom, go fly fishing through our organization. And it's really humbling to see where it's, 16 years later where we're actually at. And there's a lot of people who have breathed life into it, from, employees to board members and, donors who support us and financially. And yeah, man, I'm still blown away of what Cast Hope has become. And I'm just honored that I'm the one who had the inspiration, and I'm the one that started it. And I'm the one who also continues to run Cast Hope as an executive director.
Dude, that's awesome. So what was the motivation to start it? Like, where you're just sitting around, you're at the end of your season or something, or I don't know, what kind of bug gets in your head and you say, you know what, I think we could do this. Like, how did that start?
Yeah, my wife and I, we met in college at UC Davis. We would date, get married right after we graduated. She wanted to become a teacher, and so she had to go get a teaching credential. And so I decided, I was already guiding full time. By this point, I started guiding full time like my last year of college. And I decided, hey, if you're going to go back to school, I should go back to school too. So we have a similar lifestyle. And I have this belief that every fly fishing guide is one thrown out back or one blown shoulder away from being bankrupt. So I should probably have a backup plan. So I just started working on an MBA part-time. I was guiding full-time. I was guiding like 6 days a week. And then I was going to night classes working on an MBA. It took about 2.5 years to do that. And so we moved to Chico. We went to Chico State. And when we were at Chico State, we started attending a local church there. And our pastor was talking about using your personal gifts to change your local community. And he gave this really random example about a college student who was very gifted in mathematics. And so he would tutor other students for free just to encourage them and use something that he was good with to share back. And so I walked out that Sunday, man, and I could not get this message out of my head. What was I personally doing for Chico? And so I decided, hey, I'm going to donate 1 trip a month to just encourage kids who are struggling life, kids who are having a hard time. I always had a passion for youth growing up. And so I just did word of mouth. The first Cast Hope trip I did, I mean, technically Cast Hope wasn't in existence, but the first donated trip I did was a kid who was going through a divorce. His parents were separating and he was dealing with that separation of the family. Second month was a kid who was battling cancer and really, to be honest, fighting for his life. And fast forward 6 months, and I have this junior high kid come out with his uncle. And the junior high kid, sadly, his father had passed away the year before. And so his uncle was stepping into this kid's life, trying to be that male role model. Now, you can't ever replace the loss of a parent, but, uncle's trying to step in and fill that gap as much as he can. I had him on the Sacramento River in the drift boat, junior high kids in front and uncle's behind me. And the kid caught his second fish. We net it. He's taking pictures and we're just experiencing this pure joy. And we let the fish go. And the kid looks at his uncle and goes, "This is the coolest thing I've ever done. I want to go buy a fly rod. I want this to become our thing." I call it a God moment. Some people call it a holy shit moment, whatever you believe. And I was like, wow, I have to figure out how to do this more than once a month. And all the steps were in place, Tom. I was doing an MBA part-time. I had professors who were willing to help me create a business model. One of our dear kind of mentoring couples, I really believe everyone needs this couple in their life, someone who's 15, 20 years older than us. She was a nonprofit consultant. she met with me for free 3 or 4 times. She's like, just buy me dinner and we'll call it good. And so I had these 3 really smart, intelligent people help me build what Cassoap could be. And so I finished my MBA. I took a month off, and then a month later, I was applying for the nonprofit status. And through those 3 people's help, we got approved right away. And that launched a simple vision of just using something that we were passionate about as guides to just share with kids having a hard time.
Wow. And what, like that message that you received that day, it really meant a lot to you. And then as you actually do what you were instructed to do, or motivated to do, or inspired to do, what has that done for your life, your personal life?
It's made me a lot softer as an individual. I am so blessed that I was raised in a home where parents are still married, who parents still like each other, who are financially really stable. Like, they're not wealthy, but they had extra money to go on road trips during the summertime and show the world to me. And when you're working with disadvantaged populations, like I wasn't that kid, and I didn't live in that house. And to see trauma-based kids and kids that really struggle and have to go through lots of pain and get pulled away from parents and to keep them safe, that's really changed my heart. It's really softened my heart. It's given me, I think, a healthier view of what our world really is. We had a kid. We do a specialized program each year. We select 4 or 5 kids and we take them on like a week-long road trip through Northern California. And one of these spots we fish is for coastal cutthroat. It's this beautiful little stream that runs out actually onto the beach. So as you're fishing, you can hear the waves crashing behind you. It's a really cool environment. So we fished for like 4 or 5 hours. Kids are catching a bunch of small coastal cutthroat. And then we let the kids go play on the beach. And we walk to the beach. We put our rods in our trucks. And 4 of the kids are down there in the water splashing around, having a great time. And one kid named Obi is just sitting on the sand, just looking. And it just caught me off guard, and I just went down and sat next to Obi, and I was like, man, isn't it beautiful? He's like, it's so big. And I just paused and I was like processing, so big. Obi, have you never seen the ocean? He goes, no, man, like I've only seen pictures. This kid lived 2.5 hours away from the ocean. I would find out he had never left his county. Like, wow. I got to travel. I wasn't hopping on planes as a kid. Like, I wasn't going to beach resorts, but like we drove to Jackson Hole. We drove to Glacier, and here's a kid who's 2.5 hours away from the ocean and he's seeing it for the first time. That just rocks you, Tom. Like, you can't have the same perspective after that, so I am so grateful for that, because I now bring that to my own children. Like, as I parent as an adult, like, this has really impacted me for the positive, that I can be softer I'm a girl dad, right? I have 2 girls, so caring for their hearts and loving them as best as I can. I've learned a lot from just dealing with these population of kids we work with, Cassoap.
Wow. It's powerful, man. It's powerful. What would you say to somebody that would be considering doing something like that? Like, maybe it's in fishing, maybe it's not, maybe it's something else, using their personal talents in their community. They're considering it. Maybe they've been given a similar message, or maybe they're listening to this and they're thinking, man, I could do that. I could tutor people. I could offer business advice. I could take people fishing. What would you say to somebody? What would be the reasons why someone should take action?
I would say dive head into it. Make the space in your schedule. We all have busy lives. Like, creating that time for something that's going to benefit other people. Trust me, in the end, it's also going to fill you up too. Make the space, make the time, even if it means switching your life around to create that space. And maybe it's only an hour a week. Like, it doesn't have to be a full-blown nonprofit, right? I believe each individual in this world, we have the ability to help people. And that could literally be going across the street to your neighbor and saying, hey, you're elderly. Let me take out your trash every week, right? I mean, what does it take you? 5 minutes to walk across the road, 10 minutes to move it to the road. I mean, you're talking 30 minutes a week, I just really believe we all have the ability to bless people, and on small scales, medium scales, and you just don't know what it's going to turn into.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I really believe people need to dive head first and start thinking about other people over ourselves. And that's hard to do. I love thinking about myself. I love, going fishing, being selfish feels good. Like, let's be honest, right? But we also have the capacity to serve. And I really believe we're all called to that.
Man, well, you've done a really great job with it. So Cast Hope, if people wanted to support Cast Hope, what would be the most effective way for somebody to support what you're doing?
Yeah, you can just go to the website. It's casthope.org. We have all the information there. We have some awesome videos, kind of some of the stories that we're talking about, some really inspirational stuff. Check out the videos. That's going to give you kind of the heart of the organization and what we're trying to do. And then you can donate online, casthope.org.
Man, that's wild, man. That's good for you. That's really inspirational and motivational to hear that story and just what you've been able to create. So this summer, you're going to have 1,000 kids going out.
1,000 kids over the year. Is that going
to be your biggest year ever? Is that the biggest year ever?
Yeah.
And so tell me what that looks like. How many fishing guides will be participating to be able to take 1,000 kids out?
So we have about 30 guides who participate in the organization. This year, we're going to be doing close to 300 guide trips through those guides. And we also have an outdoor part of our program. So it's not all fishing. What we learned about 5-6 years into Cast Hope is that we had to create an avenue for the kids who didn't become really passionate about it, right? Fishing is not for everyone. So we had this little small group of kids, maybe 20, 25%. We're like, yeah, that was really cool. I had a great time. I enjoyed that process, but not my thing. So we wanted to not lose those kids. So we started offering quarterly outdoor trips. So we take kids, whitewater rafting, take them on hiking. In California, we do mushroom hunts. That's kind of interesting. The kids love the mushroom hunt. It's like kind of this treasure experience of walking around the woods.
Nice.
And Tom, we all know that we now have a world that's very screen addicted, right? I mean, everybody's looking at their phones and it's transferring to our kids. And we're just trying to also create an avenue to show them that the outdoors is a cool place to be. And the outdoors is just as cool as whatever gaming system, their phone, computer, whatever. Because we do need another generation to champion our outdoor spaces. We are doing that actively. But if we don't share the outdoors and show how cool it can be, then I really believe our world's in trouble in the next 50 to 70 years.
I agree with you. And you're taking a big step in that direction to try to do something about it and get people outdoors, young people outdoors. So good for you, man. I've really enjoyed this, Ryan. I appreciate you coming on at short notice, and it's going to be a quick turnaround on the podcast, so it'll be out tomorrow. But I really hope that we can, educate people about what you're doing and bring some people in to help donate, whether that's donating their time or their money or just positive thoughts. I think what you're doing is really cool. And I think, kudos to you for taking the extra step. A lot of people think about things like I should do something like that. It's a lot different to actually do it and devote your time to it and then be dedicated to it and then make it last for what you said, 16 years.
Yep.
Yeah. Good for you, man. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And good for the kids that it's benefiting. So there was one other story that you said you had a kid that came into your program and ended up guiding on the South Fork of the Snake River. Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, he's a very successful guide now. Cast Hope, over 16 years, we now have 6 kids who have become fly fishing guides, and this is their full-time profession.
Really?
It's not the goal of what Cast Hope is, but every once in a while you find this kid is ultra passionate and you just keep feeding the fire, right? And keep that passion going. This one kid, his name was Harry. And Harry got into our program because he made some dumb decisions in high school. He started selling weed to his buddies and he got caught. And so he got kicked out of his school, and he actually comes from a really solid family. Harry made some dumb decisions. And so his parents had some great foresight, and they said, hey, we're not going to just switch you to this school 10 minutes away. We're going to make you drive 40 minutes, and we're going to change your social circle. And that rocked Harry's life because he had this core group of friends that weren't influencing him in the best way. And then his parents forced him to go to a whole other town to go to school. And that's really when Castleton came into his life. And I personally started mentoring Harry. And Harry became obsessed about fly fishing. Like, it became his thing. And next thing you know, he was fishing all the time on the weekends. Like, we bought him rods, we bought him all the gear, and he was doing it on his own. As he got later into high school, he said, hey, I don't think I'm going to college. I'm not really the education kid. Will you teach me how to row a drift boat? Because I think I want to become a guide. I said, yes, but this means if you truly want to go down this avenue, like, I'm no longer taking you fishing. Like, this means I'll facilitate a day and I'll bring all the stuff. But that means if you really want to learn how to guide, that means you're rowing the whole time. And then I will coach you and share my expertise with you as we do it. And so we did that for a year and a half. And as his graduation gift, his family put a bunch of money together and they bought a beater drift boat, a boat that was like 25 years old. And, next thing he knows, I had called the outfitter on the South Fork that I'd been working with. He's getting ready. He's already gone through 6 months of rowing on his own. And the manager at the lodge I worked for, I said, hey, you need to hire Harry. And there was a lot of pushback. He's like, dude, we deal with millionaires. Like, we're a super high-end Orbis lodge. Like, I can't take a Castleton kid and put them in the boat with someone who's, owning a huge business. And I was like, I know, but you got to trust me. I mean, I was friends with him. I'd worked with him. I was like, this kid is different. Like, he's really special. And so on my word, the lodge hired him. And so next thing you know, Harry's off to guide the South Fork. And I told the manager of the lodge, if you do hire him, I will commit to coming out for 3 days and I'll teach Harry how to row section 2, 3, and 4, so canyon down. And he's like, wait, you're going to come out just for that? I was like, well, that's how much I believe in this kid. So he got hired. I went out third week of May. We went and fished the river. I gave him kind of a, quick rundown of what I knew. And you fast forward just a couple months, I get a call from the manager in late July, and he's like, Harry is crushing it. I've never had a first year guide who already has requested dates for August. And like, everybody loves the experience with him. And thank you so much for pushing me out of my comfort zone and what I thought was best. So Harry is going back for his 6th season, just next month. Wow. And the other cool part, Tom, is when I decided to leave California, we talked about, I had, some really core clients. I handed those clients off to Harry, and Harry slowly paid me a commission to have those guys. But now about 80% of those guys I used to fish with, they all fish with Harry. So they were there when I was starting Cast Hope. They are still generous donors to the organization. And now they have a Cast Hope kid who's guiding them, 15, 20 times a year. So
wow,
you can't write this
full
stuff
circle,
up,
man.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
that's awesome. That should be that should be a story in your book.
It's going to be in the 4th book.
Some part of that. Yeah, some part of that should be a story. All right, man. That is that's amazing. That's a really great story. And good for you. I love what you're doing. And if I can support you in any way, please let me know. And I will definitely help you out. Love what you're doing. And maybe we can hook up in Star Valley and go float the salt. One of these days. That would be amazing. I haven't been on that river in so long. And I'll tell you about my first trip where I was going to Hoback Junction, and I was like, the Salt River, the Green River, which way is it? That's how green I was when I took my first trip. And I was like, oh, at the last second, like a Dumb and Dumber moment of the last second, I think it's this way. And I made it to the Salt. Unbelievably. I could have easily ended up at the Green. But Let's go fishing there sometime. All right, Ryan,
Yes.
thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll get this out right away and let you know how you can share it also.
Awesome.
And
hey, thanks so much, Tom.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
You're so welcome. If you guys like this show, please share it with your friends and then go and look up. I wrote all the stuff down here. Go to casthope.org. Ryan's Instagram is RJS Fly Trips. So RJ's Fly Trips. That's his Instagram. Cast Hope also has an Instagram, and casthope.org is where you go to support the organization or learn more. So definitely sounds like a great organization to learn more about and support if you so choose. That would be awesome. All right, Ryan, thanks so much. And we will be back next week with another awesome guest just like Ryan. All right, see ya.